In my world there is music and good vibes and laughter and lovers, adventure and friendship. We know who we are.
Welcome to Be the Wellness Podcast, where we help you master your body, mind, and the experience of life through insightful conversation, interviews with experts and thought leaders, all with a side of marital banter and some good old-fashioned humor.
Yes, we are your hosts, Adam and Vanessa Lambert, and we're committed to helping you live life fully expressed physically, mentally, and experientially. Sit back, grab a cup of coffee, and join the conversation.
Hello and welcome everybody to Be the Wellness Podcast. Adam and Vanessa Lambert are here hosting your podcast.
We are...
Actually, we're hosting our podcast
Yes.
for you.
We are your consummate podcast hosters.
Podcast hosters. The hostess with the mostest. Isn't that John Oliver's line?
Yeah.
That's like his scientific name.
Oh.
Hostess mostesses or something.
That's funny.
Dude,
He's hilarious.
that guy is funny.
That guy. He is real funny. So we're really excited about our awesome guest today, who we met last year at Paleo FX, which I believe when this comes out will be right around Paleo FX time.
Paleo FX time, yeah.
So this will be our anniversary show, so to speak.
Fancy.
And we are not at Paleo FX this year, as we are just coming home from New Zealand when this goes out. So we will be missing it, but hoping all of you who go to that event have a great time. And the person...
Ride that camel.
What? Ride that camel. Well, I don't know if they'll have it again. I would like somebody to milk. I would like someone to actually milk the camel, because I think that's why it was there, right? Because of camel milk.
I have no idea.
I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, it's possible.
I would much prefer actually photos of someone milking it
than just riding it around.
Riding like anybody can do that.
Right.
But I'd like to see some teat milking. Some teat pulling.
Let's get a little more paleo over here.
Let's make this one step further.
Although that's agrarian, right? I mean, that's like a pretty considerable distinction between paleo and not paleo.
That's
true. If you're milking your camel versus eating it or riding it.
Right. All right. Well, whatever you do with that camel, if it's even there, enjoy.
Yeah. Hashtag paleo camel.
Exactly. That will be the title of this episode. So anyhow, we are talking with today the awesome Allie Watts. And, Allie's really cool. Like I mentioned, we met her last year, and I was just immediately struck by how cool she was. Just really friendly and good-natured, and obviously very fit and healthy, and just really easy to be around. And so, we were on Allie's podcast a few weeks ago, maybe about a month ago now. So if you haven't checked that out, make sure you check that episode out as well. It kind of tees into what we talk about today, which is her recent experience with Rythmia. And she was very curious about Rythmia and was asking us about it when we were on her podcast. And lo and behold, she went to Rythmia a few weeks after we spoke. And so we get into all of that good stuff today, which was not our intent at all when we initially booked the podcast. Yeah. We initially booked it because she's just great, and she's super healthy and fit and has all kinds of great stuff to talk about. Yeah. And then it just turned out she went. then she got boarded. Yeah. She got boarded by the plant mother. And so obviously we always love sharing those stories, and it's, again, it's in our sphere. The plant medicine is in our sphere. So oftentimes this kind of thing happens where, more and more people come and are talking about it. And it's obviously in your sphere right now too, because you're hearing about it again. Yeah.
That just seems to be how it works.
You listener out there.
you listener.
Yeah. But Allie, obviously she's super fit and runs an awesome website called Primal Health. She also, owns and runs a gymnastics gym in New York City. She left the corporate world in Australia to pursue her love and passion of health and fitness. And we really dive into how that how she was able to do that, and really getting real about how, you know, that's not always a super easy transition for people. And I really love her authenticity around this. And, you know, you'll hear in the conversation, but I really appreciate her being such a voice of reason around people, you know, just throwing every caution to the wind and following their passion. Like sometimes it's easier said than done, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's you still gotta pay bills.
Yes, you still have to pay bills. Exactly. So we hope you'll enjoy this episode. This is a great time to remind you all that we have our Rythmia retreat coming up in December of this year. And if you are interested, we would love to have you. We also are offering a special authentic self course that is dedicated to that Rythmia experience. So if you want to get a little bit of coaching before and after Rythmia, you can add that on to the experience. And of course, it's not required, but for those out there that feel like they would like some support around that experience, that class is going to be dedicated to it.
Yes.
So we'd love to have you. Obviously, we're super passionate about Rythmia and what they're doing, and so it would be great to have you guys.
Mm-hmm. And without further ado, here's Allie. And we're live. Welcome to the podcast, Allie.
Excellent. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, it's awesome to have you on. We always love when we get to do a podcast swap where you were gracious enough to let us to come on your podcast. And now we get to, turn the table, so to speak.
Yeah, I'm very excited. And I was very excited because on my podcast, you talked about Rythmia.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And I'm very excited about that. So
yeah, I can't wait to get to that. But before we do, maybe you can just tee us off with telling us a little bit about your backstory, because you did the thing that so many people want to do, which is leave the corporate world. I was going to say corporate America, but corporate Australia, and set off on your own to, sort of take this passion for health and fitness to a new level. So I'd love to just hear that backstory of how you decided to make that leap and, how that's going for you so far.
Yeah, well, corporate America, corporate Australia, corporate anything, it's all the same to me. It's
right?
All corporate. So, look, thanks for asking. And I don't like to, brag about it, because I feel like I was in a very fortunate situation, albeit it didn't seem like an easy thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
And that was because I think finance is one of the biggest stresses for people. So if you don't have enough money to do what you want to do, then it's actually very, very stressful. And I think they've come out with some sort of number of like $80,000 or something.
Mm-hmm.
After that, it doesn't really matter.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, obviously that depends on where you live and everything else. But obviously to go from a very good salary to nothing at all was fine in my case, because one, I'd been in the corporate world for a while, and I'd had some good savings and some good investments. But also I had a very understanding and very well-paid husband that could afford for me to do that. Now, obviously I didn't look at it like that, because I was like, no, I want to earn good money as well. And it doesn't matter how much money you're earning. If you're earning a lot of money and then you go to nothing, it hurts.
Yeah, totally.
But I do like to put a bit of a disclaimer on it to say that I think it was the best thing in the world that I ever did. But I'm not going to tell everyone, hey, quit your great paying job and earn nothing and go and do your passion.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't think it's as easy as that. And I think a lot of people sort of promote that it is. But I would say that I always come back to health. And I heard this lovely quote. Actually, I've heard it several times. I don't know where it comes from, but it's like, at one time in your life, health will become your most important priority.
Mm-hmm.
And so when it does, everything else just doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And I feel like everyone should just treat that as being their, I guess, motivation for everything. And if you think about it, does it really serve your health to work in a corporate environment? And for many people, maybe it does. But for me, it was destroying my soul.
I really love that you say that, it's not for everybody. And I do think there is this sort of rampant feeling of like follow your dream and do what you love. And although I totally agree with that, I think that there is almost a flippancy that goes along with it. Like, oh, it's super easy. Just, just go out there and start being a coach, or just go out there and do this and everything will work out. And I think that it's really, sometimes it's a little short-sighted for folks, and people are a little caught off guard with how much it takes, how hard it is to really break through in this industry. And I really love that you're mentioning that. What do you think for you? Obviously, you had some great support, and you had, a great spouse and all of that good stuff. But what do you think was really the thing that helped you to succeed in branching off and starting your own business?
I think it was the issue of just my soul just feeling destroyed. It just left a bad taste in my mouth whenever I thought about being in a corporate office and making money for a bank. I think that was actually the driving motivator for me. But I also think it was when I gave myself permission to do that. Money just naturally flowed for me because it was my passion, and it wasn't something that I was really concentrating on, because I gave myself permission to do what I loved.
Mm-hmm.
And so as a result of that, it just flowed because I wasn't putting so much attention on it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it's a really critical piece, and it's a part that can be really tough to sort out for folks, I mean, and myself having just left my not quite corporate but government job, that just fundamentally
kind of like a corporation.
Yeah, well, I mean, it operates like one. I mean,
Right.
it's big and slow and bureaucratic, but it's also incredibly stable, and you just kind of have that thing going. And I'll tell you, one of the things that was tricky for me in making this transition is going from that feeling of there always, there's just going to be a paycheck that shows up, like twice a month, but sometimes it's a little bit more, sometimes it's a little bit less, but it's going to be there kind of no matter what. So it's really easy to not think about, where the next meal is coming from or any of that kind of stuff. But when you transition into entrepreneurship, now all of a sudden, like everything you do seemingly correlates to, the size of that next check, whether it's coming or not, or kind of how all of this stuff goes. So it's a really tricky piece to do what you're saying, Allie, and like not be worried about it, but when you're actually worried about it, because you're like, well, if it doesn't show up, it doesn't show up. And how does all this whole thing work? So that's awesome to hear that you're able to just let that piece flow. Cause I think,
But once again, I had the fortunate opportunity to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think there's entire coaching businesses that are built around helping people manage that flow of energy and let things happen instead of like trying to force it. So I'm glad it's working out.
And I also do think too that, the grass is always greener sort of philosophy. And especially I see this in health coaching where they go, oh, health coaching would be amazing. And so they quit their job and then they're like, they start trying to health coach and they're like, I don't even know if I actually like this.
Yeah.
So I think it's really important that you like it. I was already doing it a bit on the side as well, so I knew I liked it. So for me, it was like I was yoga teaching, I was a strength and conditioning coach, I was training people, and I knew that was my passion. I knew I loved it. Whereas a lot of people just think, I want to get out, so this sounds amazing, but obviously in reality it's not so amazing. And so what's a great idea, and I've heard a lot of people do this, is sort of transition slowly, start getting on, even if it's for free, start, say in the case of a health coach, start actually coaching some people and see how you actually do like it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I love that we're kind of just diving into the business aspect of this stuff, because I think obviously you're a Primal Health coach and you've got tons of certificates and tons of accolades around, your expertise, but it takes a lot more than just certificates, right? It takes like the actual process of it. And I think it's so important that people, transition slowly and get their feet wet. How did you start to, do that? Obviously you mentioned you were a yoga teacher. Was that sort of the catalyst for you to start coaching people, or what was that that transition for you? What did it look like?
Yeah, so I guess my background is in sales and business. So I was a business banker and that sort of thing. So I've always had like an entrepreneurial business sort of mind. And then I actually started off I was like yoga instructing. I did several different long like yoga teaching retreats in India and Bali and all of that sort of thing. And then started teaching some yoga classes at different studios. And then got a qualifications in all my personal training and coaching and that sort of thing. And so then started personal training and coaching. And so I actually did that for several years. And it wasn't till probably only a couple of years ago that I actually became a health coach.
Mm. Cool. And what was the catalyst that you thought that was the important piece to add on to it? Because obviously, if you're doing strength and conditioning and yoga, what was it about the health coaching specifically that felt like it rounded out your offering?
Yeah, like it's 80% nutrition, right? And lifestyle. And so my clients were not getting the results that they should have been getting. And it was all because of what they were doing outside of the time that I was spending with them. And that was a big lifestyle piece. And so as we all know, it's not just about exercise. And in fact, exercise is a very small part of the body. And then on top of body, we've got to look at like the mind, the spirit, the inner child, relationships, finances. And that all comes together to affect your physical state.
Absolutely. So let's talk about your philosophy because you're kind of touching on, the different aspects or cornerstones of it. But what, a client comes to you, what's your approach with them? Do you start with sort of the basics and build from there? I'd love to just hear kind of your approach when someone comes for help to you.
Yeah, so I operate a couple of different businesses. So one of them is actually strength and conditioning gymnastics for adults. So I own a studio here in Manhattan, and that's very much based on like calisthenics style training. And I find that people get into that and then as a natural way of progression want to know how to eat and how to live. And so we have workshops on that, and then they follow that lifestyle pretty easily once they've started that type of training. And so another business that I run is called Primal Health, and that is essentially a lifestyle coaching business. So I actually employ other Primal Health coaches to coach. So a lot of the time I'm not actually coaching the client. It's more about coaching the coaches, although I do help out obviously when needed. But in terms of our philosophy, like you said, it's really based around the whole lifestyle aspect. And I think people more and more are realizing a couple of things, that diets don't work and that weight loss doesn't mean that you're healthy.
or happy. Yeah.
So, or happy, exactly. And that was a really good point, Adam, because happy, apparently 4%, and I'll just use America as an example, 4% of women actually, and I think that it's even less than that, but 4% are actually happy with their body image. And
crazy.
so it doesn't matter how much weight they lose or how much weight they put on, they're still not happy with their body image. So that's the issue more than more than anything else. So that's why actually a lot of my coaches are trained in psychology as well, because it's obviously more than just, the actual losing of weight per se. So we do address the body, and I guess when I say body, I don't just mean exercise, although obviously that's a part of it, but I'm also talking about movement, like putting movement into your day.
Right.
And then also on the sort of exercise front, it's not just about any type of exercise. It's what's the minimal viable dose of exercise that you need to be healthy. Now, obviously, it depends on your goals as to what type of exercise you need to be doing. But the majority of our clients are people that just want to be healthy for long term. And so they don't need to go on a cardio machine for hours at a time. They need the minimal viable dose. And I can go into details about our exercise structure and how we've designed that to fit the, I guess, the ideal structure. But moving on from body, then obviously, and body also, I guess, is all about like sleep, and that's a big part of it. And then mind is like, well, what are you actually telling yourself, and what are you actually reading and listening to? Because all of that is determining a lot of things for you. And then the spirit, and that's something that I can't wait to talk to you more about, because I've had my own spiritual journey recently. And then inner child, and what I mean by that is like, you know, remembering when you were a child and looking at children and what makes them happy and glow, and look at how often they laugh, and what are you doing to light that up. And I'm sure on your awesome retreats, you guys jump into this inner child all the time.
Yeah, we try as much as we can.
And I mean, just going on a retreat lights up your inner child, right? So
totally.
And then we look at relationships and finances, because like I mentioned at the start, finances are a huge factor. And also relationships, and not just like your partner, your sexual relationships, but just relationships in general. I was really saddened to hear some ridiculous figures about, and once again, they were talking about Americans, but they were saying that most people don't even have one person that they could ring up or go and see or text to really confide in.
I've heard this recently.
And I just can't fathom that. And so I really think that your relationships are what make up how your health is.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So I mean, and hence why you have a community, and hence why you take your community out into all these beautiful settings together and to spend time together.
Amen. Yeah, I think, it's kind of the unsung hero of the health story, right? The community. And I think that obviously we know it intrinsically how important it is. We feel better when we're with people that we care about and we feel cared about, but it often does just sort of get taken for granted. We just kind of assume everyone has somebody. They must, whether it's a sibling or a parent or a friend, we just assume that everybody at least has somebody. And I heard that recently too, that there was a staggering number of people who really don't have a person. And so I think it's really important. I love that you're talking about that. And how do you encourage that? I mean, are you creating community within your gyms and your online communities, or what's the approach that you take with kind of helping people find more connection?
Yeah, well, absolutely. I mean, the Gymnastics strength and conditioning studio has got its own community, very much so, and we also welcome people. And so it's just an amazing setting, and like people really do connect there. And in New York City, that's quite a nice thing to have, because it's quite rare in different gyms to have that. So, and then with the online, absolutely we do. We have like an online community that anyone that's doing the course, they do it together, the program together, like a 28-day program, and they're all in together, like just chatting about, hey, did anyone find yesterday hard, and I'm doing this workout, what do you think, and I've just made this recipe and I'd like to share it, and so there's a lot of that going on, which I think is a really important part of it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I find that it's really interesting with online communities. If people seem willing to put themselves out there a little more and like share a little more deeply, because there is that sort of shroud of protection of being, behind the internet, so to speak. But I do think there is that really cool part of it where people are really willing to share a little bit more deeply, because there does seem like this interesting dance between autonomy and connection that happens in these online systems.
Yeah, although I'm sure on a retreat people open up even more.
Yes, and especially if they know each other from online and then they sort of have this like, the foreplay of the online community in a way where then they can become much more intimate when they see each other and they already have sort of a dynamic and a connection.
Yeah.
Yeah, and vice versa, I guess. Like I just did a retreat with 75 women, and obviously over that week we really connected, and now we've got a group where we're all chatting and we all share stuff. But
Right.
it's even closer than if we hadn't met, obviously, because
Yes.
we can actually put a face to the name and a relationship to the name. And so I think
Yeah.
the combination of the two is profound.
Totally.
Yeah. Well, and then if you add the layer, you can add another layer of just ridiculous experience, which you had with these 75 ladies. So
Yeah.
maybe we should just dive into that, because it's actually a pretty interesting way to talk about community and shared experience and all that.
Yeah. So where to start? I guess
Yes.
I guess it all started. I actually interviewed you guys, and you guys mentioned that you have an amazing retreat coming up, which is a bit different to your normal retreats, which is at Rythmia. And I think you said it was November, December?
December, yes.
December.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's right before Christmas, actually. So it's like a perfect little, holiday gift to yourself.
It so is. Well, I
So
I
it
was
is.
so excited about it that I actually couldn't wait till November, December. I had in my head it
I
was
love
November,
it.
December. So I actually reached out to Rythmia after talking to you and found out that they had a Majesty group, which was an all women's retreat. And
Hmm.
so I thought I'd try that, although I was sort of a bit hesitant because I was like, oh, I don't know if I really want to be with all women for a week. And, like, I don't know. I feel like there's a bit of, and I think this is changing, but when you get a whole lot of women together, sometimes they bring each other down a bit. Is that,
Mm.
and I think I'm
Hmm.
thinking too much of a corporate setting. This was the
Right.
absolute opposite to that. And I actually reached out to you because I was a bit hesitant. And I'm like, what do you think? And you're like, yep, do it.
I
And
saw that women's retreat, and had we not been in Peru, I would have probably hopped into it too, because I was like, I bet that will be epic.
And Vanessa, I can't thank you enough for saying that, because I honestly would not have done it if you hadn't
Oh,
given me that decisive comment of just do it. And the thing is, I was actually going through a stage in my life where I've just been really indecisive, and it was very hard for me to make decisions. And
interesting.
and I say was because I'm definitely not now after that retreat. But I really needed someone like you to say, "Yep, you've got to do it. It'll be awesome." And
Awesome,
so thank
awesome.
you
Well, I
so
felt it
much.
strongly.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. I was like, oh, I mean, because I had seen it come through, so I was like, no, be my spirit animal, go do
So
it.
can I just say to all your listeners that if you're like not sure whether you want to go on your Rhythmia retreat in December, just do it. You
Aw,
absolutely have to go. There's no question.
it's yeah, it's really magical stuff, isn't it?
It really is. Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. So tell us about that experience. I'd love to just hear. Obviously, you're going in with some hesitation and some reservations around, not only the experience itself, but obviously doing it with women. Tell us, just kind of give us a play by play of how that all went down.
Yeah, so I was basically just wanting to get some sun because I was a bit over winter in New York, and so I was trying to think of where I could go, and I heard a few different podcasts and read a fair bit about ayahuasca and spoke to you guys about it, and I was like, it doesn't actually sound like that much fun, um,
It's
but
not a party drug.
but it's one of those things that I thought, you know what, that would actually be a not good, but an experience that needs to happen at some stage.
Hmm.
And I thought
Hmm.
if everything lined up, then maybe now's the time. And
Yeah.
everything lined up, and so I went along and
So,
yeah.
Ali, really quick, I just want to pause you there because actually I want to grab this second because people often are in the same exact place as you, where they're just not sure, they've heard about it, they've done some research. And, one of the things that we always tell people is that when it's your time, like it's just your time, you'll know it, things will line up, and suddenly it'll just feel like everything clicks. So for you, it sounds like you're alluding to that. How did you know, okay, it's really time for me to do this? What was that sense of I don't know, just clarity around it?
Well, do you know what? I didn't have that until
Mm-hmm.
after the first ceremony. I almost didn't turn up to the retreat. I was actually quite like I'm a bit of a daredevil. I'm happy to try anything.
Mm-hmm.
But in saying that, like I've never done any sort of like hard drugs or anything like that. And I didn't. There was a couple of reservations I had. One, I didn't actually feel that I had enough psychological issues, and I've always thought, I had a great childhood, and so I didn't really feel like I had enough problems to deal with, which is quite funny because
I love that.
because everyone's got issues, no matter how big or small you actually think they are, and that's one thing that I actually learnt at the retreat, which was really amazing. So there was a bit of that going on, and there was also this, I don't really think I'm ready for the horrible nausea and throwing up and all of this sort of stuff. And is it really worth it? After my first, so we did 4, as you know, we do 4 ceremonies in 4 days. And then we have another 3 days. And after the first ceremony, that's when I knew that this was the best move that I could have done. So if you're still hesitating, don't worry. And do you know what? Everyone else was worse than I was. That I was like, by the time the ceremony came around, I didn't even care. I'm like, I'm here now. Of course I'll do it.
Right.
But yeah, so it was quite funny to see everyone was actually probably more sort of worried about it. I wasn't saying worried about it, but I was like, I don't know if I need this.
Yeah, no, totally. It's a great
for
point.
the same reason that I don't feel like I would go and see a psychologist. But now I definitely wouldn't, because I feel like I got 15 years of psychology in 4 days.
Yeah.
So,
absolutely. That's awesome. So, okay. So, what was it about the first ceremony? And, just really quick for folks out there, I'm sure if you've been listening to our podcast, you know what ayahuasca is and you've heard of Rythmia, but just as a refresher for anyone that might be listening to the show for the first time, ayahuasca is a psychedelic, combination of plants that you drink in a brew. And Rythmia is a facility that hosts ceremonies around this particular psychedelic, and it's helps to obviously create these amazing life-changing breakthrough experiences. And that is giving it like a very short summary, but just in case folks out there don't know what it is. So you're at your first ceremony and you drink the brew. And what was it about that first ceremony that made you feel like, okay, I'm in this and this is the right place to be?
Yeah, actually, I was going to say to you too, you can link to a podcast that I'm going to, that'll be out by the time this comes out, I think. And I've interviewed the COO of Rythmia, and I've also on in that same interviewed 4 other women and their experiences.
Awesome.
So I recommend everyone going and listening to that, because they're amazing stories. But so mine, once again, may not be as amazing as theirs, but everything's amazing in its own little window or whatever.
Of course, yeah.
So I actually went in it with absolutely no expectations and didn't really care if I really got anything out of it. And I think that was a great way to go into it, actually.
Totally, yeah.
And I don't know why. I just thought, oh, I'll just see what happens. Although one thing I did sort of go in with a bit of, I'm not throwing up attitude.
How'd that work out?
Okay. I'd love to hear how
and
this
the
works
reason
out.
is because I actually really, really don't like throwing up. It's the worst feeling for me. I'd rather feel nauseous and not throw up than throw up. I don't know why. But incidentally, I actually didn't throw up through the whole 4 days. I think I was the only person that didn't.
Oh wow!
I did feel nauseous at times. Don't get me wrong, but I didn't. And in actual fact, one of the ceremonies, I felt so ill. I was literally about to throw up, like when it starts, and I was on my knees, and I was just about to throw up, and a shaman almost ran over to me and did their thing And
Mm-hmm.
I felt amazing. Like,
Hmm.
and I'm not a big believer in this sort of thing. So like when someone tells me like a shaman's healed them, I'm like, yeah, whatever. But I'm telling you, I was amazed. Like I couldn't believe it.
Wow,
So
that's
that actually
awesome. I
happened to
love
me in
it.
the first ceremony, I think. And
Oh,
then
okay.
also in that ceremony, I had just some amazing things. Like I think it was on the first drink. Yeah, so I think we might have had 2 drinks that night. Um, I just started crying, like, and I could not stop, but I wasn't like screaming or anything like that. I was just the tears were just coming and coming and coming. And
Mm-hmm.
I remember having this image pop up of my mum, and I've never really seen her cry. I mean, maybe once, but I don't think so. And I don't, like, she's just not a very emotional sort of person. And I
Mm-hmm.
had this message come to me, and I think it was in words, and it was like, just be more vulnerable, open your heart, open your heart. And it just kept saying, like, be more vulnerable, be more. And it was just this amazing sort of realization that I'm just not vulnerable enough.
Mm-hmm.
And so from that, it was, yeah, it was just like this, just, just be like, and my daughter and my husband are both very, very loving and emotional and opposite to me. And it's just
Mm-hmm.
like, be more like them and be like that to them. And so then
Mm-hmm.
I had this, so yeah, it was just this amazing thing. And then another sort of thing that was just calling me to go outside and lie on the earth. And I lay down on the grass, and being in New York in the city, I just haven't had that nature
Mm-hmm.
experience for so long. And it was just calling me, and I looked up at the stars, and all of a sudden this new mantra came to me. I was lying there, and I had my daughter's hand in one hand and my husband's in the other, and I was lying on the earth looking up at the stars, and it was like, shine like a star wherever you are.
Mm.
And it was,
Love it.
yeah, it was just amazing. It was like there was just this beautiful sky, and it was like, it doesn't matter where you are, if it's who you're with, and just doesn't matter, just shine like a star.
I love that. I love that. I had a similar, not exactly a similar experience, but I remember looking up at the stars, and one of the things that I was asking for was to be better at receiving love. And I remember the stars shining down on me, and it was like, when everything is expressing love at you all the time, it's just about how you receive it, how you interpret it. So it's like, would you expect a star to do something other than just shine brightly on you to show its love? And it was like, those stars out there are so powerful, and I just remember looking at them and saying, like, oh my gosh, I can feel the love just beaming down from them. So I've got my own little star story, and
Yeah.
I love the outside and the, just the natural environment of Rhythmia. It's so beautiful and special, and just, it feels so good to be amongst the energy of nature that way in that area.
Mm. And I think the biggest thing for me was like, it wasn't just, okay, I've had that experience and let's move on. That
Mm-hmm.
has absolutely changed my life.
Mm,
Because, and
that's
that's the
amazing.
difference, I think, between ayahuasca and other drugs. That it
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
actually, like, you can't forget once you know. It's like me saying to you, like, can you imagine just going and eating badly now, like for the rest of your life, like changing your diet back to like a sad, like an American diet?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's impossible for you to do that, because you'd have to let go of everything that you know, and so you just couldn't do it. And for the same reason, I just can't not be vulnerable now. And like, my husband and my daughter would have seen a massive difference since I've been home. And it's not just in my behavior, but just the way I think and the way I do things. It's like, as soon as they're in the house, in the door, nothing else exists.
Mm.
And
I love that.
It's just an amazing, like, I mean, I should have been like that beforehand, and it's a shame that I had to drink ayahuasca to make that happen. And here I was going into it thinking, not thinking, I'm perfect and I don't need to change anything, but just thinking,
Yeah.
I don't really have anything to work on. Completely wrong. And it gets worse. Each ceremony I found out, one of the things is show me who I've become. Now that was just horrible. I just did not want to see that. That was like some ugly monster. And then another profound thing in the second ceremony was not so nice in that I've had some really bad surgeries. So I had double hip operation. I was in a wheelchair for 8 months. I've had 7 ligament tears in my left shoulder and had 3 surgeries in that. And so I've had lots of, when I was 9, I was in a coma for 6 months because I got hit in the head with a golf club. And
oh my gosh.
So like I had a fractured skull and whatever else. So I've had lots of surgeries. And unfortunately, in my second ceremony, all of those surgeries happened again in the actual ceremony. So you've heard of like the virtual sort of surgeries that can happen in ayahuasca. People who haven't done ayahuasca or don't know much about it are probably listening to this going, she's a freak. And I agree. And I would be saying the exact same thing if I heard this. So so just bear with me. But so I went through like all this pain, and actually a couple of things. When I actually turned up at Rythmia, I had a fractured heel. So I was on crutches because I actually damaged my foot from a high handstand on the rings and jumped down, and the mat was in the wrong spot. So so a couple of things came out of that. One is I had these surgeries and I was in absolute agony the whole night, and it was just horrific. And then and I didn't really tell too many people about this or talk about it much because it wasn't something that I thought would even happen, nor can I believe it, but my heel went from 95% injured to 10% injured. Like I just got rid of the crutch and I was just walking around fine.
Whoa. Yeah. That's amazing.
And my shoulder felt, it's been like 2 years, but it still always hurts, and it felt amazing. Like my heel is fixed. So the physio actually said to me, it'll be 12 weeks when I went to Rythmia, it'll be 12 weeks before you can walk properly. So I'm just, I just can't even, I don't even tell people, like, honestly, I think probably, and I've just told a lot of people now, but I didn't even tell anyone on the retreat because I was still like, no, this just doesn't happen.
This can't be real.
Yeah. So, I mean, people probably noticed that I wasn't using the crutch anymore, but other than that, like, so it was amazing. And part of that too was I had, as part of all the surgeries, there was this message that came across. It's like, you don't need to be injured to be loved. And you can see how many injuries and surgeries and I haven't mentioned like even a 10th of them to you, but I've told you some of the big ones. But obviously I've been living my life injuring myself, not like deliberately, but obviously subconsciously, deliberately, in order to be able to accept that love. And this image of me when I was young came across, and I remember it now that it's come, but I had totally forgotten about it. When I was quite young, my brother pushed me down the stairs and I split my chin open, and I received a lot of love and attention. And it's the reason why it's also profound for me is that I'm going to make sure that I don't give my attention to my daughter when she's only hurt. Because I don't want her to be hurt, have to get hurt to feel loved.
Yeah, absolutely.
Man, that's a really powerful insight, and I think, unfortunately, I guess is the term, I think it's actually pretty dang common, whether it's like a physical injury or if it's an emotional injury, that sort of like there's a there's just a pattern that develops, when we're little ones that are just seeking out, and not only attention, but also, what's the word? When you do something right, what's
Validation.
Validation. There
Yes.
you go. Thank you. Attention and validation and all of those sort of things. I mean, that's what sort of guides the development of our neural pathways when we're little ones, right? We're like, okay, well, this hurt, don't do that. This felt good, do more of that. How do I get more and more of these behaviors? And man, once you're in that space, as you've recognized, you can start to peel all of that stuff back, and you're like, damn it, here I am, 40 something years old, in my entire life, I've been basing, most of my decisions and even the subconscious accidents, quote unquote, that happened to me around these two very basic fundamental things from when I was 5. Like, how does this
I know,
even go?
Adam, it's so true. And I feel stupid even talking about it. But I'm so glad I've had the realization, because I even saw yesterday, my husband came home, he hurt his hand and he showed me it. And I was like, I grabbed some ice quickly because it looked quite swollen. And then all of a sudden my daughter goes, oh, can you get me some ice? I've got a scratch here. And she's trying to show, and I'm like, she's already doing it. It must be. And so I'm like, no, you don't need ice, but let's go and play a game.
Well, and it's interesting to take it back even a step further, because it's like, okay, yeah, you have these injuries that elicit energy, but then if you look at the way that you construct or create your lifestyle, you can probably see patterns of how you live in order to like be okay with injury, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And and it's almost like, oh, well, that's another challenge. I can see how much, how I can do workouts without that leg. Or
right.
and when I had double hip operation in Australia, they wouldn't do it because it was like rehab's too hard, so I had to do it in Hong Kong.
Oh, wow.
And even in Hong Kong, I mean, they'll take the money, so they don't care. But
was this a hip replacement,
it would have been a
what was
replacement,
the surgery?
but I was too young. If I had to do it now, then it would be. No, I just had FAI, which is a femur articular impingement, and it's where the femur head is too big for the hip socket, and so it scrapes. So even walking or anything, so they shave the femur head to fit into your socket.
Wow. And is that just from like compound abuse?
Well, actually, yes, but they don't say that, and it doesn't have to be. But it's very interesting. The more I researched it, the more I noticed that like top level athletes seem to get it a lot. But they do say, but it does depend. You have to have the structural problem to start with for it to get worse. But essentially, your bone actually gets bigger the more you grow. The more you exercise. So if I hadn't stressed it, then it wouldn't have got so big. So once again, I brought that on myself.
Interesting.
So it's really interesting how it all pans out.
And what I'm hearing is that, what you discovered was one of your blind spots, something you didn't even see about yourself that was actually creating quite a bit of your reality, but you had no idea it was even there.
Exactly. And I think the other thing is, if a psychologist had told me that, and look, I've read Louise Hay's book, which is a great book about, I'm not sure if you've read it, about the different injuries that you can have and what that actually means. And I actually found that quite interesting. But I was like, yeah, that's all cool. And and I'm sure, like, if a psychologist had sat me down and said, this, and this, I would have went, yeah, I know. But it's a different thing. I can't explain it. It's just it's a message, like I said to you before, once you know something, you can't let that go.
Right. It's a difference between hearing and understanding and knowing it. It's like you actually know it physically, you know it emotionally, and there's no way to disconnect yourself from that wisdom now.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the full experience of it as opposed to reading a book about
Absolutely.
it. It's like, I read a book about going to Montana and, there's bears in Montana. And then you go to Montana and you deal with a bear. They're very different scenarios,
That's a fine analogy. But the other thing is the decisiveness that I've had since I've come back. And the flow. Before I was very indecisive about anything, and now it's not even a decision. It's just the intuition just comes out, and I trust it. So many things. I mean,
Interesting.
just amazing.
Yeah. So I'm curious what your thoughts were about the breath work component and whether or not you had any experience with holotropic breathing or any Wim Hof stuff or whatever going into it and how that aspect of the whole thing was.
Yeah, I'm glad you asked actually, because I noticed that a lot of women had a lot of experiences just in the breath work alone. I've actually done a fair bit of breath work, a bit of are you familiar with Soma breathing, and
Yeah.
then also Brian McKenzie, Art of Breath,
Right.
and so I've done a bit of breath study and have a bit of a breath practice in my own sort of daily habits, but I did find it very, very profound, especially, like I said, I mean, I'd done a lot of that before, but I noticed the women really got a lot out of it. So I think it's great,
Yeah.
and it's a really good combination.
Yeah. And so since you already have a practice of some kind, have you noticed any change in sort of where you get with that practice post Rythmia?
Yes, and that is a really good question. And the answer is I do not skip it. And I don't even, it's not even a conscious decision, but I have not skipped my morning or evening meditation since Rythmia, which was like a month or
Awesome.
two ago, like a month ago. And also breath work, because I just can't skip it. Like, it's not like I feel like I have to do it. It's just like, it's not
Yeah.
even, it's
Yeah.
like you brush your teeth. I do meditation.
Yeah.
But before
Yeah.
going to Rythmia, I still had practices, but they weren't as consistent, although they were consistent, but they definitely could have been missed. But now it's just not
Right.
even a question.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
almost like calling home. It's like I need to call home and talk to my mom here and there. It's like I need to do it once a month. I need
Yeah.
to do it once a day. It's just something that happens.
Yeah.
It just happens.
Yeah. It's so cool. And I think this is why I am so in love with the plant medicine, is that it's like you can spend 5 years, 10 years, 15 years trying to change this pattern you have, or maybe not even trying to change it because you're not aware it's there, but having these places in your life, these blind spots or these habits that just aren't serving you. And no matter what you do, no matter how hard you try to focus or be disciplined or, just do the things, it's like, 4 nights of ayahuasca and suddenly you just can do the things. And it's like, thank God for these plants that are so helpful to us in getting us out of our own way.
Yeah, I know. And Vanessa, I remember you telling me that you'd given up coffee because of Rythmia. And this is really funny because I didn't see myself as a coffee addict. I mean, I'd have like maybe 2 to 3 coffees in the morning. And I was like, I'm not an addict. And when you said this, I was like, I'm not an addict, but I definitely am not giving up coffee because I need it. And it was really funny because one of the reasons I didn't want to do Rythmia is because they made you give it up a week beforehand. And I was like, I am going to feel like crap for a week. I'm not doing it. Anyway, so I went off it for a week and felt absolutely fine. I didn't even have a headache or anything. And then did Rythmia, and they're like, oh, now 2 weeks more, you shouldn't drink caffeine or alcohol or whatever. And I was like, alcohol's fine. I don't care about that. But coffee again. Yeah. And so I went off it for 2 weeks after like they told me to or whatever. And then I'm like, cool, now I can have coffee. I had a coffee and I was like, this hasn't woken me up at all. I don't feel good or whatever. So now I've gone to decaf. And even then I'm just like, yeah, whatever. But I don't even I don't even want to give up coffee. I actually want to have it, but I just don't want it.
No, it's like
I want it, but I just don't.
It's actually annoying me. I like the taste of it, and I'm actually having decaf because I'm finding that coffee's just too strong for me. It's just making me jittery. And so
it just rewires things.
I mean, I'm still having like mushroom coffee, it's got a bit of caffeine in it, but nowhere near. I'm finding coffee just too strong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a pretty interesting stuff. And, again, I think it's like, it's always the blind spots. It's always the things that you don't think are there for you that are the most transformative. And I think that's what I just love about the medicine is that it's like you get to experience the wisdom of the plants helping you to discover the places that, could use some love or some care or some shifts. And I think that that's the thing is that we are so cerebral and we are so set in the way we think about things that it's really hard to zoom out. It takes something kind of shifting the paradigm for us to be able to really zoom out and see things from a new perspective. And it sounds like you definitely got that.
I think the other thing is you don't have to think about anything anymore. You don't think about it. Just drink it and see what happens. That was
Right. Yeah.
and what I like about that is then, and also, for people that aren't very good at expressing their feelings and talking about things as well, I think it's perfect because you don't have to talk about it. You just drink it and see what comes of it. And I really like that. But in saying all of this, I don't actually think that one needs to do plant medicine in order to get this. And I really feel that with a good breath practice and a good meditation, you can get the same sort of results. And I feel like I actually get that daily now because I'm practicing.
Yes.
And so there are some people on the retreat who are like, I'm going to go back next week and do this again, or I'm staying and doing it again. I don't feel like that at all. And what I'm sort of thinking is, maybe I will do it in a year's time to like update it, or like I know you're having a retreat, so I might go to that, but like I don't feel like I have to do it. So it's not something like, I'm addicted to this. But I sort of do feel like that in the future at some stage I'll be called to do it again and I'll take my life to the next level.
Yeah. I think that's a really important point to make because I think that's sort of another fear of people is that they think like, oh, now am I going to be this like hippie ayahuasca person who's got to go to all the retreats and do all the things. And I think that again is a really individual thing.
I mean, maybe if you like throwing up a lot, then you might be addicted to it.
Well, I think the plants help you decide, some people finish and they feel like, no, there's still more here. I need to get like right back in and work a little deeper. And some people are like, no, maybe I'll never come back. Maybe a year or two. But I think that this is like, again, it's such a personal journey and it's going to be different for every single person who does it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's going to be different, and there's no right or wrong answer.
Exactly.
I know, like after the first experience I had, I think it was 18 months or something. I was like, nope, have no, and it wasn't like, no, I don't want to do that. That was a negative experience. It was just like, no, I'm good. I got what I needed. It was, I went in for a new paint job and I got it. Like, I don't need another one,
Yeah. I still like
and then when
color.
it's time, and then you're like, oh yeah, okay. I could get involved in this again, and yeah, it's interesting stuff.
Yeah.
So, Allie, what's next for you, and where can folks find you, and all that good stuff?
Yeah, well, I'm pretty busy enough. I'm actually not that busy. I'm pretty good at delegating. But where can people find me? Well, so I've got my own site, which is just ally.fitness. Otherwise, primal.health, and then transformgst.com if you're in New York City and you want to come and do a gymnastics strength and conditioning training workout with us. Please come.
Oh, I'd love to.
We've got awesome.
That's like my dream
awesome
gym.
coaches. A lot of them are ex-Olympians, and they put me to shame. I can tell you that. So, so any of those, and hopefully I'll be at Rythmia at your retreat, and
I would
and
love
see
that.
all these people that are listening to us now.
Yeah, that would be so awesome. I think by December you'll be ready for that second dose.
I think I might be actually.
And it's really cool. We went before Thanksgiving this year, and we were sort of hesitant, like, is it going to be weird with the holiday right after? Like, we weren't sure how the energy of that would be. Like, would it feel rushed because of the holidays and that kind of thing? But it was honestly so amazing to have the natural break of the holiday after we had done our retreat, which just kind of, it was like the whole world was kind of in a space of vacation. And so I think we're really excited this year because we're going right before Christmas. And I feel like it just feels like a nice time to wrap up the year, kind of prepare for the holidays, and then also have this sort of wind down that naturally occurs towards the end of the year as you start to, like work winds down, everything kind of pauses for a minute while you're doing the holiday thing. And I'm really excited about the timing of it. I think it's going to be great.
Yeah, it's perfect timing. And you can throw up your Christmas dinner before you have your Christmas dinner.
Before you even have it. You can
it
throw
works
up
for
your
the binge
Thanksgiving.
eaters too.
Yeah.
Exactly. Funny.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Allie. It worked out perfect. We had planned to do this podcast before you went, and you had to reschedule and some things came about, but I feel like this was absolutely perfect. It was meant to be that we had this conversation, that you had that experience. And I'm so glad that, we got to be a small part of the catalyst that brought you there, because we really believe in Rythmia. We really think the work that they are doing is really special
and like
stuff.
I said, Vanessa, you weren't a small part. You're actually the decision for me. So thank you again.
I am the consummate pusher.
Yeah.
Whenever I need a decision made, I'm going to call you.
All right, perfect. All right, Allie, thanks so much, and we'll see you
Perfect.
soon.
Thank you.
Bye. All right, folks, we hoped you enjoyed that podcast. We hoped you did.
We really hoped you did,
We
but
hoped
now
you did.
we don't give a shit.
Oh, tenses. Tenses are funny. But we do still hope that you'll join us in Rythmia. So if you guys are interested in getting in on that experience, make sure you go to our website. Remember, we have an opportunity for you to make payments, which is not something that Rythmia themselves offers. So if you want to come, but you're worried about, shelling out that big lump sum all at once, we got you covered.
Yeah.
So get on over there, grab your spot, set up your payment plan, you're good to go.
Yeah. And basically, the sooner you do that, the lower the monthly payment.
Yes,
Which is
exactly.
handy.
Exactly.
It's kind of a linear
Yes.
equation.
Tenses and math. All right, guys, we'll see you next week. Thanks.
Bye.